welcome back to the Bene channel. Today we have a very special guest with us, Michael Nagler. Michael is an author, nonviolence educator, and peace activist. He has taught many courses on nonviolence and is the president of the Metta Center for Nonviolence. Thank you so much for joining us today, Michael.
You're very welcome, Rosie. And as mentioned before, I'm looking forward to it as much as you are.
Oh, thank you so much. So, Michael, in your latest book, The Third Harmony, Nonviolence, and the New Story of Human Nature, I read it. I don't have it with me because I read my books on Kindle, but it was wonderful. Um, you address two complaints about nonviolence that I hear all the time. To quote from the book, one, nonviolence meaning it would have never worked against the Nazis, and two, that's just not human nature. Can you help explain to me and mainly to our audience about why these complaints are inaccurate?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I have fielded them and made this explanation many times, and it's necessary many times. First, about the fact that it, quote, didn't work against the Nazis. Well, it actually did in several different places. In the south of France, there was a little town called Le Chambon, Chambon-sur-Ligny, and they rescued like maybe 5,000 people from Eastern Europe, mostly Jews, during the war. They refused to follow orders, not issued by the Nazi regime, and there was an interview with the German commandant of the region. His name is Major Schmeling. He said, "We knew what was going on. We knew you were hiding those Jews, but the Gestapo wanted to raid, and I told them, this has nothing to do with violence, and raiding them and using violence will not help." So they actually reached the heart of this man without even knowing it. And that's a very common experience in nonviolence, that you do much more good than you realize. Just as with violence, you do much more harm than you realize. So another really famous case was actually in Berlin in 1943. It's called the Rosenstrasse prison demonstration. It's where Jewish men who were married to non-Jewish women had been left alone for that reason, but then they were all arrested. There's a film about this, which kind of misses the point about the nonviolence, but it's a good film other than that. And so these wives gathered in front of the Gestapo headquarters where the men were being detained and refused to go away. And finally, after just a couple of days, by the end of the weekends, I think it's the end of March in 43, in Berlin, mind you, the Gestapo caved and they let those men out. And, really, this is just a tip of the very warm iceberg that really nonviolence is much more powerful than violence in any form because of its inherent contact with truth, with reality. Even when someone is attacking me, for example, it doesn't really happen very often. I know that there's something in that person that doesn't want to attack me. So rather than speaking to the attacking surface of the person, I speak to the loving inside of the person, and it wakes them up. So we do have to clarify this a little bit, Rosie, if I still have a little more time. It depends what we mean by work. That's why I have a chapter called Work in Quotes versus Work. So nonviolence will always work in the sense that it will always elevate human nature. It will always make things better. It will always alleviate the situation going forward. Whether it will do exactly what you want in that moment is not always the case. It's not a for grabs. I think here's a case for a settler who's walking down the street in Tel Aviv, and this was some years ago. And there's a protester there. Sorry, I don't remember exactly. He walks up to the settler and puts out his hand and says, "Hi, my name is so and so, and I'm happy to meet you." And the settler says, "Well, my name is Mr. Hate," and kicks him into the gutter. So I would say it didn't work, quote unquote, but I'm absolutely positive that it worked. It reached that person on some level. So it can be proven amply, if you take into account all these factors, that nonviolence worked against the Nazis, and it could work against the Nazis. It looks like we may have to use it here against what Noam Chomsky calls proto-Nazis. The problem is, though, you have to know how to use it. Nonviolence requires training, it requires a mental attitude. It does not come easily, but once you know how to do it, I think there's nothing more powerful. So, and your second question was?
Thank you. So one thing that we talk about.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh,
Against
yes.
human nature. Yeah,
Oh,
human nature.
yes, not human nature. What do you think about
Wow.
that?
That is a big question. And I think we have to start by admitting we do not know what human nature is, especially in the West. Frankly, we have a very shallow concept of what a human being is. And there are a number of really good books coming out that demonstrate that human beings have an innate, I'm going to go out a little bit on a limb here and say, we have an innate sense of unity, which can be covered over by conditioning. And modern advertising is very good at that. But it doesn't ever get destroyed. It's always there. And so the nonviolent actor can learn how to reach it and can actually bring out the person's human nature. And I use an example in the book, How the Media Gets It Wrong, about a man in Lebanon who was in a marketplace, a suicide bomber. The guy was there with his 9-year-old daughter, and I'm forgetting his name at the moment, he threw himself on the bomber and took the explosion. And so the newspaper said he violated human nature. I would say they got it exactly wrong. He engaged human nature when he did that. So, as I say, there's an excellent book called In Search of Human Nature by a friend of mine, Mary. She is a good friend, but I'm forgetting her name at the moment. And there's a book now by Rutger Bregman, a Dutch historian, called Humankind, which just totally will disprove that over and over again. I mean, even he takes these cases where we all said, when they were reported to us by the media, we said, see, that shows you, we're selfish, jealous. And for example, the murder of, you probably have never heard about this, Rosie, and I'm sorry to be the one telling you about it, but a young woman named Kitty Genovese in Queens was murdered. It was late at night, like 2 in the morning or something, and she screamed for help and woke up a lot of people, but they didn't do anything. And so that were duly reported. It became in a whole syndrome was named after this, that the bystander effect, that we see our fellow human beings in trouble, we don't respond out of fear. Well, it turns out that all but one of the people who heard her thought she was drunk. And so they didn't need her. Then there's other details in the story that got passed over, like the fact that she, died in her friend's arms, the fact that the person who stabbed her was caught a week later and confessed. All that is ignored. And so one investigator asked a New York Times reporter, I mean, we're not talking about, Fox News here. Yes, a New York Times reporter, why didn't you print these additional details that change the whole story? He said, that would have ruined the story. So, I mean, my comment on that is here's people who are ruining human nature. They're ruining human life, but they're not willing to ruin the story. So, once we peel off that modern conditioning that we've all been, exposed to, we find that human nature is not only capable of nonviolence, but nonviolence, as Gandhi said, is the core of our nature. And we make that point in the film. Rosie, we also have this documentary film called The Third Harmony. And I don't know if you've seen that. The Third Harmony is a big project. And right behind me,
Wow.
we have
Oh,
Zoom item 3.
whoa. That's amazing. That's amazing.
So we have a book, a film, and a board game, and they're all available now. You can get to
Oh,
them various ways. There's a website called thirdharmony.org, one word, and
yes.
that has the film, and we're going to enhance it, put these other things on. But you can find out all about it on our website.
That
Good.
sounds wonderful. Oh, thank you, Michael. Thank you so
You're welcome.
much.
Very welcome.
So one thing that I love that you talk about is something that we talk about a lot here at Pace Bene too, and that is about building a culture of nonviolence, seeing nonviolence not just as a tactic that we use in times of distress, but as a way of life.
Yeah.
So I was wondering if you could expand on this idea for myself and for our listeners.
Yes. Oh, I would be so happy to. Uh, yeah, if you depart from the principle that I just mentioned, and you can just take it as a hypothesis, that you're going to put to the test, which is how we should all do all of these things, is that nonviolence is the core of our nature, and start from that as a kind of groundwork, infrastructure. You would build out from it a whole different way of life. For example, we know our criminal justice system is appropriately called restorative justice. We try to catch people, we punish them, they catch more people and punish them some more. And right now, I read a horrible statistic the other day. It made me heartsick that there are 80,000 people, mostly, almost all men, many of them men of color, who are not just in prison, but in solitary. And the UN has explored this. A UN rapporteur on torture has said that after 15 days in solitary, the damage is irreparable. So, we're destroying people. And one kind of idea that we've used in Metta is just never, never degrade human nature. So let that be a kind of, you won't pass that line. So from that, then you look at, how do I do economics? How do I do business? How do I do relationships? How do I do criminal justice? And for many of these things, there is an alternative that's already up and running for criminal justice. It's a burdening system called restorative justice, and people have proposed it could even be used in the case of Derek Chauvin. And Black people have been saying this, I'm very happy to say. And you're going for Gandhian economics instead of greed-based economics, and even war, the big one. What on earth are you going to do? I noticed that the G7 met in Europe, and they agreed to be all against China, but they didn't agree to do anything about the environment. So in the case of war, there is actually a very small now institution which Nonviolent Peace Force and 20 other organizations have been building on, and which has been presented and incorporated in a report at the UN. And it's called, the name for it now is, I don't particularly like this name, but the current name for it is Unarmed Civilian Peacemaking, or Unarmed Civilian Peacekeeping, which just means stopping a conflict. And so we have a really great, we cover that in the film very well. And we have this story of, Derek Oakley and Andres Martinez, I think his name was, who, they found themselves confronted by a militia come in to kill these women and children, and the militia ordered them out, and they said, "I'm sorry, we are international peacekeepers and we can't leave." And the militia backed out 3 times. So yeah, that story is in the film. And again, all it needs is for us to strip off this conditioning, to examine this impulse to say it would never work, and really look at, A, has it ever worked? For which is enormous evidence, and B, how does it work? That's what gets you deep into the questions of human nature and so forth.
Wow, thanks so much. I love that story. And thank you for sharing.
Yeah,
Um,
bad.
my last question is one that I'm particularly interested to hear, and that is, what does nonviolence mean to you?
Ah, well, how much time have we got?
It's a bit loaded, I admit.
No, no. It, you might want to ask, what doesn't it mean to me? I mean, first of all, we in the middle of our roadmap, we have 5 practices that we recommend for everyone. Become media literate, get a spiritual practice, find out all you can about nonviolence, be more personal in your interactions, put away the cell phone. And then fifthly and finally, ask yourself, where can I make my best contribution? And go out and make it. And all those things, Rosie, they make up a really, comprehensive package. And so, in my case, I have a spiritual practice that has been going on for decades now. And, am I very good at this? No. But still, it has, to a really considerable degree, opened my heart and made me more compassionate, more understanding. And I always liked nonviolence, the little that I knew about it, but I didn't know much about it. And it turned out that my meditation teacher, who's from India, Ishwaran, he met Gandhi and was deeply impressed. And his life changed. He didn't become an activist. He didn't become a satyagrahi, but he was completely turned around by meeting Gandhi. And so through my listening to Ishwaran thousands of hours, I quickly came to understand that Gandhiji was much greater figure than we had thought. He's more than just even the father of the nation. He was a discoverer of the greatest capacities hidden in human nature we all need to know. And on the one hand, he's much greater than I had thought, but on the other hand, he's much more accessible. Through working on ourselves, through spiritual disciplines, we can actually get to a little bit of what he had, what he just gave us. Remember one time I was going to protest against the Livermore Labs. That's when I was a professor at Berkeley, and I remember somebody saying, if we had a million people out here, we could stop this thing. And I said, that's probably true. Then I thought, if we had one person who was a million times more committed, we could stop this thing. I don't know what he or she would do, but it would work. So to me, nonviolence really is kind of a pole star of my life, because I don't see it as just a technique for addressing conflict, as you've heard. I see it as applicable in so many ways, and really I try to make it the building block of my whole life.
Wow. Well, thank you so much, Michael. I loved talking with you and learning from you. Thank you for taking the time and for being here today.
Thank you for your super questions.
Oh,
I look forward to seeing what we can do with them. And
yeah.
get yourself a copy of the Cosmic Peace Force.
Yes, I will. I will. And listeners, get some too. I'll put a link to it in the description. Wow.
Very good. Great. So, Rosie, I will go now and ask Stephanie exactly what links are the best.
Sure. Yeah. Is this Stephanie Van Hook?
Yeah.
Great. I was just emailing her yesterday. So she's got my email. Whatever she can get me, I would love to put them in the description. I often direct viewers down there so that they can go and click on.
Wonderful. This is how we make it grow.
Yes, exactly. Oh, well, thank you so much. It was so exciting for me to interview you. I remember my mom read several of your books when I was 10. She's continued to read your books. And so I was like, I